Oh, man. Oh, we're recording. Hey, what's going on, IK fam? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back again to give you some more of that quality IK goodness, and I cannot tell you how excited I am because this is going to be more of an introduction video that will cover a lot, and it's going to be really cool with the data that we're going to show off, but it's going to build upon that I'm going to talk about a little bit kind of halfway through, if not towards the end, on some of the next video series that you can expect from this. Before we get started, as always, make sure you guys sub, like, ring that notification bell. If you want to join our Discord, hit us up on the pinned comment and description down below. Okay, today we are going to touch on, so I went through a bunch of servers and I pulled a bunch of data. I thought this would be really cool to do because again, we got KVK coming up, right? Day one has started for some, and also eventually for some future content. We're going to have to wait a little bit for this next part, but what I'm going to show you real quick is some data that I pulled from 3 servers as I now have to move over. So we're going to show you this one. Cool. So let me pull this up and we're going to unrelease some data now for you to see. I think I have to reset. Yeah. Okay. So there is 150 pieces of data here that I went through, right? So I looked at the top 50 overall troop power from when we last did our strongest servers, right? The top 3 strongest servers. So in that case, it was 38, 8, and 57. And you can see here, right, that I did basically what I did is I went in and I captured their marches. So example of how we did that is we went to ranking, strongest troop power, and I just kind of clicked on each person to see. So that's kind of how we pulled that initial data. Now we'll go back and you can see here, right, 2 is really 1. And we'll scroll down a little bit. You can see some of the ranges here too. Right, a lot of the marches that we ended up pulling for all the different elements, right? So all 7, and you can see we go right up to 150. Now there is some, so there's 3 things I'm actually interested to talk about here, right? So we have some percentages and some data that we're going to uncover, and I want to briefly touch on just a few special that you'll see kind of with these asterisks here. So there's a few of these throughout. Just kind of when I was looking at marches from the top 50 overall players. Right, there were some marches I just thought that were a little interesting based on that limited set. Right, I'm sure if we went through to the top 100 for each, that would have been fine. But just to try and keep things a little more accurate for the top end, right, for what we kind of would figure out on seeing later game, right, we kept the range here between 220 and 290, 291K for the troop power. And as I said, we did the top 50 overall troop power players from each of these 3 servers. So the first data sets that we're going to release are going to be these ones. And these I thought were interesting because it just shows a basic breakdown of when we look at these top 150 players, right, 50 from each of these 3 servers, you can look at what the percentage breakdown is for marches. So we see Waters was used 64 times out of 150, brings us to 43%. Earth was used 32 times at 21%. Shadow, right, 15% here at 23, which to me is... It is interesting. And then you have 10 for fire. It's at 0.07%. We have holy 0.06, lightning 0.05, and then wind at 0.03, right, being arguably used the least there with lightning, right, a total of 5 and 7 times overall out of the 150 sets that we pulled. Now, I don't think this is... seeing water at the top, I don't think is really out of the ordinary, not only because it is the starting march that pretty much everyone gravitates towards, but a lot of people have been enjoying Attila's silence, and it doesn't seem as though they're really been changing from him that much, at least when we just look at this limited pool grouping, right, since the 1.8 update that kind of lowers his silence percentage and then provides it there to the other. And so I think when we look at this, right, we're still seeing a high usage for water, along with seeing, you know, again, Earth still having good numbers and trending there at 32 for the 21% usage. And then Shadow, which is kind of what it seems to be the next highest. And this is interesting because it is above fire. And I guess my initial thought would have been, you know, seeing people still feel that fire is viable. And that's not to say that it's not. And again, remember, this is a limited pool. This is a small data pool, right? If I would have done the top 300 and we doubled this, you know, some of the numbers might look a little different. You might even see more people running fire. Because remember, bear this in mind, right? the asterisk here, right, when you look at kind of the shadow to fire, or even shadow over, maybe even arguably lightning too as well, is that we're looking at the top 50 starting top down, right? Now, most of the Shadow Holy players are going to be like 1 through 20, right? If there are any, it'll be very close to the top of your troop power boards and your servers. And then, again, I didn't really find too many people that were running Shadow like past 20, past 25. There were a couple here and there, but not as much as the bulk amount near the top of the boards. And so from here, right, it is interesting, again, lightning not being used too much. But I think the thing is, right, when you look at lightning and wind, is that I think it also kind of gives opportunities, right, where even if they're the least used, there are still chances where these marches can be, well, I guess for lack of better words, I don't want to rehammer it by saying they still can be viable even though they can. But I think there's an opportunity to kind of show off. That's probably a better way to put it. An opportunity to show off what those comps can do just because there are a fewer amount of people running them, at least, again, within this group set. So with that, right, I think those are just a couple of my general thoughts on just the interest level of there, right? Again, if you are someone who does a lot of arena, if you did a lot of PvP and SVS, right, I would love to know what you think about these numbers, right, for people that you matched up against, for people that you saw, right? Again, do you think some of these numbers are, right, pretty reflective of maybe what you've seen in KVK, or maybe even what you see in your home server, right, for arena-wise? With that being said, now let's look at the next group set here. And this, I think, is probably arguably the more interesting, I don't know if I'm more interesting, but just another very interesting one. And we'll go here and say, okay, so this set now shows you the top March composition for the 4 Immortals plus Dragon that were the most used, right, out of these 150 sets. It starts off at the top, Water, 50% usage. This is out of 64, right, that you're seeing, where they ran the standard kind of Merlin, Yoshi, Herald, Attila. Now, there was some other variations that we were seeing, right? So if we scroll down and we look at Water, there were quite a few of Dito, Merlin, Attila, Herald that I saw. Even a few others where we were seeing Ramses worked in, right? Like you could see Ramses worked in here, right? What is that? 3, 4, 5... 6, let's see, 7, there's a few more here, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, right, so again, Ramses being included 10 times, right, out of 64 marches, even though it was with different variations, right, like the Merlin, Dito, Ramses, Attila seemed to be pretty viable for what I was seeing next to most often, where Ramses was included. And again, there's a few others, and we'll kind of go over some of the standouts in a bit. And then we look at Shadow, right, 18 times at 78% usage, right? I believe this is out of the 23 Shadow marches, right? People are using Himiko, Elizabeth, Siegfried, and Bjorn. And then we got Earth at 41% usage for this comp, which it seems pretty standard, right? The Cleo, Zenobia, Charles, and Alex. Lightning, pretty standard, YSG, Genghis Khan, Peter, Richard at 86% usage. Again, Lightning out of 6 out of 7, so not again, a smaller pool there. Holy, I believe this is 5 out of, what is this, 9 that they had. So they had 56% usage for Gilga, Charles, Manco Kabak, and Theodore. Right, so again, kind of going with like this 4-1 flex comp, they're seeing higher usage than just kind of pure. Then we go to Wind, and this is at 60% usage, 3 out of 5, right, where you see the Kin, Barca, Arthur, Baldwin. The other two comps, I believe, were also including Saladin. So it was different a little bit. It wasn't like it was an edge out, but again, small pool here for Wind. And then Fire, even though they had 10, they tied at having 3 for 3 here at 30% usage each, right, where the consistencies here are Empress, William, Hippa, but then there's an Ashoka or Gilgaflex for the backline that we saw some different usage on. So I thought that was interesting. And then if I can, let's dive in now last to some of the special marches, right? Just some interesting ones that I thought were pretty cool. And for this, I'm actually just gonna, oh gosh, I actually just want to Z to A this. Okay, yeah. So we'll just do this, then I can just change it up, right? So there was 11 marches here I thought were a little interesting, not because they're like ones I haven't seen before, but just based on the data sets, I wanted to show it visually. So for Earth, right, you're seeing Zenobia, Elizabeth, right, and we've actually been seeing Elizabeth Bethany, and you'll see a little bit of a trend here too as well for some of the other marches, right, where you got Zeno, Elizabeth, Alex, Charles, right, and this is in an Earth march with Dragon. Then we look at Fire, and you're seeing Gilga being used as kind of a backline flex here in a 4-1 split, very similar to Earth, except, again, the choice there for the substitute is Elizabeth. Then we look at Holy, same thing, Gilgamesh being used again here to pair with Theodora, or I should say being used again, just in a different march, right, but Monko. And then you also have Richard, right, so you have kind of this 3-2 split that you're seeing, but this was the top march that I saw in one of these 3 servers, so I just thought it was very interesting to point out, right, with Richard's son, and then Gilga, right, with just high damage output, Theodore on heal, and Monko doing his amazing stuff that he does. I actually forget what Monko does. Let's look real quick. Hang on, I gotta scroll down here. Where's this guy? I wish this stuff was alphabetized. It'd be so much easier. I always forget what his skill is because I just haven't read it enough. Gain control immunity for our Holy Immortals and channel a dazzling light for 15 seconds. That light increases dodge rate to all allies. After the spell channeling is complete, cause physical damage to all enemies every 3 seconds after the battle ends. Oh, until the battle ends. Energy will no longer be gained after the spell. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's not bad. It's not bad. Okay, and then we go next to Lightning here, which is, we got YSG, Genghis, Peter, and then El Cid. I thought this was interesting because I rarely see El Cid, right? And I'm wondering, what I will say is I just rarely see him in general, I think, as most do. But I thought this was interesting because I think there was maybe 1 or 2 El Cids. Let me actually check here. Let's go Cid. Yeah, so never mind. This was the only Lightning comp out of the top, the Lightning comp that included El Cid, or the only time El Cid was used out of the top 150 here. So again, I thought that was interesting. Shadow, we actually had Charles being used. This, to me, is very similar to kind of what we're seeing with like Elizabeth and Gilgamesh, except Charles being frontline, right, to kind of soak and take damage. And I've been seeing Charles used more frequently in Shadow Marches, and it seems like it obviously has been that way for a while. But again, just because not everyone may know this, right, I really wanted to kind of highlight some of these standouts that I thought were worth noting. Water. Right, seeing Elizabeth used here on the back line, again, very similar to what we saw with Earth, right, but now being paired with Merlin, Harold, and Attila, right, so a little bit of a variation. And then we get to a few more waters here where we see Dido, Ramses, Attila. Again, I haven't been seeing Ramses used that much, so I thought it was interesting because some people have been saying like Ramses might actually be able to be making a little bit of a comeback. Over Harold, just depending on who you want to use. So again, seeing kind of the Ramses Attila combination now is interesting. I'll be curious to see, and that's the one thing I really would love, is to kind of see reports on how certain Immortals perform, and I'll have to figure out a way if maybe I might be able to collect that data in some way, shape, or form. And then we look at another water march, right, which is Merlin, Dido, Attila, and then including Hippolyta, right? I've actually seen Hippolyta include in a few other marches, right, kind of as that other frontline flex pick that they're using, just, again, to kind of slow down the energy regen. Then we look at Merlin and now Baldwin, Attila, Ramses. I thought this was very interesting. Again, remember, these are all top marches, right, at minimum 220, 225K or higher, right, and they're within the top 50 overall for each of these 3 servers. So, again, I don't know if these are just interesting comps that people are messing around with, if they're testing, if maybe they find them to be viable. But like I said, because of the differences I noticed, I thought it was worth noting and pointing out. And then we look at another water here, right, which is, again, Merlin, Dido, Attila, Charles, compared to, oh God, well, I thought I had another water here before. Oh, I didn't. Okay, yeah, so this is the one with Charles that's being included. And again, just kind of showing you a similar view on when we had Charles included with Shadow, right? Kind of, again, a frontline tank, but now he's being used same way, right, but with water, still having that Merlin-Dido combo pairing as well. And then the last one I noted here was Wind. And this was Zenobia, Kin, Harold, Hannibal, Barca, right? So a 3-2 split, which is the second 3-2 split that we're seeing. And you have Kin Emperor, right, going your backline for wind, or excuse me, Zenobia, your backline earth, right, heal, and then Herald, your front line for water, being paired with Kin Emperor, Hannibal, and then the Wind Dragon. So I just thought these were interesting to show off. Again, what I would love to ask is if you're someone who runs one of these comps, or if you have seen this comp used before, you've gone up against it, I would love to know your thoughts on the viability of how you feel it performs, whether maybe overperforms, underperforms against certain matchups, and maybe even some of the reasoning why. I know we didn't necessarily kind of do what we usually do sometimes, where we'll kind of break down the skills and kind of look at the synergy between them, like we've done for some of the Immortal breakdowns on their most used skills. And I'll definitely do something like that in the future. I just know that I wanted to try and keep this shorter. We're already pretty much at 15 minutes. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video on kind of our latest content, kind of data dive breakdown on just something interesting that I thought was cool to show off. Now, what I will tell you here at the end is one of the things that I'm really looking forward to do, and I don't know how long this is going to take because it does take a while to pull the data, but what I really wanted to show, and this was actually something I wanted to show off before the 1.8 update, before they increased the max levels and added more new talk skills, is I wanted to show what the most used talk skills were per March composition. So as an example, if I just take water here, right, as I just kind of give a typical, wait, let me go back up to the top. So if we look at water, right, an example would be like, I'll take Merlin, Yoshi, Herald, Attila, and I'll show you what the top 12 most used talk skills are for that entire composition. Instead, how I did it before is we looked at each individual Immortal. And though that's great, the challenge is that you can often have a lot of crossover, because if I look at the top 3 most used skills per each Immortal, you might have 1 or 2 skills that are being used the same on them, right? So it's not really showing you a unique comp usage, right, kind of on these one-time uses, right? So if you're trying to figure out, hey, what are the top 12 skills I need to run on my main March going into late game, that's something that I want to cover, and I've been wanting to cover it for a while. And so hopefully it might take a while for me to get there, just because, again, the whole point of me waiting as long as I did to try and do something like that was because I wanted players to kind of stabilize their talk skills by having the majority of them maxed out at 7 or 8. And then allowing for that to kind of sit there where more and more people are able to get those maxed as well, to kind of figure out what their ideal pairings are. Just not something you could do right when the game first starts, and probably wouldn't be that good to do right now because there's just a lot of fluctuations between new talk skills being tested and then being changed to see what kind of is more sustainable going into late game. So we'll wait a little bit for that, but that's a series I'm really excited to bring you guys, and hoping that it could even be something used not only specifically for KVK, but even just for a lot of the newer players that are prepping, right? Kind of a guide on how on what kind of mid to late game talk skills you want to ideally get for your Immortal, so that way you don't overinvest or maybe misinvest in one way or another. So again, would love to hear what you guys think about me covering something like that too as well. Let me know anything and everything in those comments down below. That is it for me. Until next time, we will catch y'all later.